afternoon. Call to order this special session of the Yuma County Board of Supervisors. Also sitting is all special taxing districts. It is October 22nd, 2020 at 1:15 p.m. The board members will attend either in person, by telephone, or remotely via electronic conferencing. Was Supervisor Porteous able to join us by phone? Okay, but we do have a quorum, so we will proceed. Supervisor Pancrazzi, will you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. First on the agenda is call to the public. Call to the public is held for public benefit to allow individuals to address issues within the board's jurisdiction. Board members may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statute 38-431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to criticism, or scheduling the matter for further discussion and decision at a future date. Anyone who is concerned about COVID-19 and does not want to be put into an open setting can submit an email call to the public statement at publiccomment@yumacountyaz.gov. These email forms of public comment will be accepted until 8 a.m. the morning of the meeting. All public comments will be read aloud during the Yuma County Board of Supervisors meeting that starts at any time. Do we have any public comments? Okay, anybody from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into the discussion and action items. The board will open each of the following items separately for discussion and action as appropriate. Item number 1, which is the only item we have today, discussion and possible action regarding the 2021 County Supervisors Association legislative proposals. Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Do you know how many stranded bills we had out there last at the end of last session?
There were a considerable number. I think the number would be about 12.
Oh, that's
I was
quite
thinking
a few.
around 10 or
Okay.
so.
Yeah, 10 to 12. It was a sizable number that were just left stranded.
That's why you were so concerned about 10 more.
That's why I was so concerned, yeah. So we'll get into that as we go through the measures.
Okay.
So first of all, Section 1, the 2020 CSA Coalition priorities for consideration. Engage all legislation and proposals adversely impacting county authorities and resources. And I'll just note, CSA spends a considerable amount of their time trying to prevent poor legislation. It's often well-meaning, but telling counties how to do their job and what to do. And so we spend a lot of time every year, a lot of political capital trying to stop that kind of legislation. They will reintroduce stranded bills. The pandemic response may result in a shift of legislative priorities and, of course, preventing additional cost shifts to counties to address any expected state budget shortfalls. As we know, they appreciate or have a habit of balancing their budget on the backs of counties and cities. So we want to prevent additional state cost shifts to counties. That is a priority. Priority 3, eliminate mandated payments to ADJC. It's an $8.5 million ask. Currently, that $8.5 million is paid by Pima and Maricopa counties. We were successful in getting the small and medium counties out from underneath that, but we need to work together to get the other 2 counties out from under that unfair burden. Number 4, contain county contributions to all tax. As you know, we were able to fund something recently. Susan, what did we fund with that $500,000?
The 8 additional vehicles for
Yes, for the sheriff, right? Thank you.
Yes.
And the reason we were able to do that is because we had budgeted $1 million, which was the amount our all tax was going to increase. That's not how much we pay. That's how much it was going to increase year over year, $1 million to our taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably because of COVID, the legislation had become stuck. and they only authorized $500,000 in additional costs. Only. That's 8 sheriff's vehicles, right?
That's
So that's the money they're taking from our taxpayers that could go to public safety. Number 5, increase investment in transportation and protect current HERF resources from sweeps. So I think is anybody, I'm going through these quickly. Is there anybody opposed or any comments?
On the
Any other
gas tax?
supervisors?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. Number 6, support broadband infrastructure funding.
Definitely.
Number 7, address outstanding public safety pension debt and remove barriers to responsible repayment, something that we're currently looking at. And I might mention on the broadband issue, the schools having to do remote learning has exposed the serious broadband issues in our rural counties.
Oh, no kidding.
The one thing, I'm going to go back to this real quick.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, on the increase in the gas tax, which
Yes.
one was that? You know, I'm for that, but I am very concerned that it's going to be one of those funds that the state goes after because it's going to be such a hefty one for HERF. Like every time they sit there, they put themselves in a bind. They go after those funds and sweep them, which turns around, why are we doing the tax if we're not going to get the money to help improve our roads?
Well, we need to put something in the legislation that
Yes.
prevents it from being swept.
Yes, even
So-
if it's
Yeah, so,
We will definitely make that effort.
yeah,
Yes.
to get
If
it so
it's-
that they can't sweep
And
it.
unfortunately, our champion for that legislation
Is not
did not
running
run for
again.
office again this year. But
Yeah.
there's plenty of others. You noticed on the meeting yesterday, the opening, we had the leaders of both the House and Senate publicly state they were for repairing this problem.
As were Charlene and Lisa, who are also on that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It
From
would be
Yuma.
nice if we could do something like when Supervisor Pancrazy was up at the state, like we did with the lead, where it's monthly doled out to the counties. Instead of capping into one big lump sum where it's sweepable, come down with some system where monthly you get a
The
payment.
county gets just like you do sales tax,
Yeah.
state shared sales.
That way it doesn't accumulate and it doesn't allow to be swept.
The same way. Mhm.
I am counting on our county supervisors to get that done. I'll be watching. Goodness
You're
knows
so
I've been in the
funny.
thick of that fight. Not successful.
Okay.
Flexibility language, we have used that, but not recently. But it
we
is
just
very
did.
important to other counties, so it is definitely a
We
CSA
just
priority.
did with the
You
truck.
did authorize this year that we potentially would be able to use $500,000 from flood control to assist the jail district if necessary.
Mhm.
Oh, you're right, yes, correct. I stand corrected, thank you, Susan. Okay. So now the county submitted legislative proposals, which we need to discuss and figure out where everybody stands. Short-term vacation rental property tax parity. And that is to create equity and uniformity in how short-term vacation rental properties are classified in relationship to the traditional hotels and the transient lodging industry by partnering with ACO to introduce and support a bill similar to Senate Bill 1490. And the purpose of that is especially in our high tourism areas. People have multiple homes, 5, 6 homes, and they rent them out as an Airbnb.
Right.
So they're competing with the hotels.
And
it's
they're paying homeowner tax rates and not rental tax
not commercial rates,
Mhm.
right?
Believe it or not, we are starting to see that in Yuma County.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Well, it's lucrative,
Yeah, it
you
is.
know? So,
And wasn't it 6 or more? Where was that legislation or that proposal where it impacted them if they had more rentals or Airbnbs?
so any discussion on that?
No, I'm in favor of
No.
that.
Support it.
Okay. Short-term vacation rental regulation. Allow local governments to reasonably regulate short-term rentals through zoning codes. So we have areas, for example, Sedona, they have a housing shortage. People who work in Sedona can't live in Sedona. And the partying, and, you know, disturbing the neighbors, that's where this is coming from. It's coming out of Yavapai County.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
good reason. So any discussion on that? Okay.
But I think we support it.
Yes.
Okay, third, rural counties transient lodging tax. Enable counties with a population of fewer than 500,000 persons to levy a tax on transient lodging in unincorporated areas of the county for economic development and tourism.
Mhm.
So that would put counties on parity with what the cities already
Do.
have the ability and do. And some of them are very, very hefty.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised the rates I've seen when I've stayed at hotels out of town. Yuma's is 2%. I've seen 13, 13 and a half. So any discussion on that?
Mm-mm. Totally
Okay.
in favor.
Number 4, resources for juvenile dependency representation. Allocate additional funding to counties impacted by increased costs for providing mandated attorney services for indigent defendants in juvenile dependency matters. And Susan, how hard has that impacted? I know it impacted us hard a couple of years ago. Where are we today?
It has gone down significantly, and it's really not a problem. And I think if you look at the graphs that have been provided by CSA staff, it's really not a problem anymore. And this is one of those items that, do you want to use your political capital for something that is not priority as much as others might be?
Yeah,
So-
but Maricopa County and Pima County are still under the gun.
Well, they didn't bring it forward, and they didn't comment today.
Okay.
I think in the large counties, it's decreased there. Didn't they say that, Susan? Yeah, during the meeting today, they mentioned that for the large counties, their issue has decreased. And I was pretty sure ours had too.
Mhm.
Yes. So what do you want to do with that? And I agree, if you, as we continue, you'll hear me comment about what kind of a workload we're putting on CSA. And the problem is, in a normal year, these would be fine. But they've got to work on at least 10 pieces of legislation left over from last year. And those are all good pieces of legislation that the CSA voted on. They've
Plus
got to
the ones that
already
were-
carry the water on those.
Plus the ones they were fighting or
I'd
trying
almost-
to amend.
I'd almost say no on this one.
And I'll just mention, just because it's not a problem for us, we want to, you know, we want to support counties that are having an issue. That's why we have a coalition of counties. But
Right.
I don't think it's as bad as they put it forward.
Now, is ACO picking this up?
ACO will probably address it. Yeah, I think we'll let
Oh.
them carry it.
Yeah, let them run with it.
Okay,
You know,
I'm with you on that. Number 5, dangerous, incompetent, and not restorable. Establishes a civil commitment process to commit and hold dangerous individuals charged with crimes that cannot complete the criminal justice process because they have found to be incompetent to stand trial and unable to be restored to competency to stand trial. So this one comes forward because you have individuals who've been arrested for a crime, sometimes a violent crime, and they're dangerous, they're incompetent to defend themselves or understand their proceedings, and they have been through the process, but they're not restorable. They have to be released,
I know.
and they're still dangerous, and there is no mechanism to deal with that. And there are a couple counties that have individuals who are significant danger, and there's nothing that can be done.
Mhm.
So to me,
Yes,
I think this is one we need to support.
I agree, because I think there may be similar, if
Yeah.
not.
Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg,
Yes,
really,
I know, huh?
you know, as far as the whole statewide problem. But if we can start hitting it one thing at a time.
Okay. Write-in candidates. Require write-in candidates to maintain residency in the county, district, or precinct They are proposing to represent for at least 120 days prior to filling their nomination papers, or excuse me, filing their nomination papers.
It's not gonna take any capital on this. This is gonna go through it like boom. I really think so.
Here's what I think.
Okay.
I think it's another thing that CSA would have on their plate. To me, I'm going to vote no, because they can bring this back up next year. And there's no election between now and next year. So if it gets passed next year, if it's that easy, it'll get passed next year. And before the next election, it becomes law.
Okay.
That's my thinking. Like I stated today in the meeting, it was, there's nothing wrong with the legislation. It's a good idea. But we need to limit what we're putting on their backs, because the other stuff's more important. You follow me?
Yes,
Yeah, I agree with that.
but.
Okay,
Oh,
so
okay.
I think we should just vote no on that one, and you guys can work on it the following year. I'm sure Pinal will bring it back if it fails.
I'm sure they will.
So,
I'm not sure I'm gonna vote no, though. Sorry.
okay, remember you're carrying 3 votes.
I know I am. Uh-huh.
So I'd ask you to think about that.
I will think
If it's
about that.
because there is no harm. Just do it next year and be done with it, if it's that easy. Just one more thing they have to carry,
I'll read the whole thing.
and then they can be
look
less
into it.
effective, or more effective
I'll
if they
look
don't have
into
that
it.
on their back. PSPRS excise tax, allow counties with board approval to levy up to 0.5% excise tax for payment of the county's unfunded liability in the Public Safety Personnel Retirement System or Corrections Officer Retirement Plan, CORP. Allow counties to use excise tax revenues for direct repayment of PSPRS or CORP unfunded liability, or to secure bond revenues to pay down PSPRS or CORP unfunded liability.
Mm.
Any comments?
Yes, it shouldn't be a simple majority.
Supervisor Simmons?
I agree too. It needs to be a unanimous or a supermajority.
A supermajority if it's a 5-member board, and a unanimous if it's a 3-member board, and then sent, like it says, send the tax initiative to the public for a vote.
Yeah, so you can see there on the consensus column,
That's
they
exactly
agreed to
what we
that
want to
after
do.
Yeah.
Yes,
I chatted with Supervisor Wilson.
yeah, after we got to it,
That's something I
yeah.
can support.
So,
So a supermajority, I think the consensus one I can vote for.
okay. Number 8 was withdrawn.
Yeah, that wouldn't have gone anywhere.
It wasn't going anywhere anyway. It didn't have support even from the supervisors.
Yeah.
Military leave pay. Modify how statute defines day for military leave to eliminate discrepancies in total compensation due to the total number of hours worked during a shift.
I'll say afterwards, you want to read number 8 just so they know what that was?
Sure, I
That
can do
was-
that.
Was shot down.
I'll go back to that, yeah. So this one, my comment was, I'm sure it's a good idea.
It's not even a good
But-
idea, number 8.
No, 9, we're on 9.
Okay, okay.
And again, it's been this way for decades. I don't see the immediacy, and I don't think we should put it on CSA's back. Deal with it next year. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Supervisor Simmons?
Yeah, that's one of those ones I think can wait. I mean, it's been this way for how long?
Decades. So 1 more year?
It may be put up by somebody else besides
ACO
us.
may go for it.
I don't think so, but they might.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should put this on CSA's back. And ACO is going to have the same problem. They're going to have leftover legislation too. So, that's not our fight. Although Supervisor Molara is on their board by virtue of being the CSA president.
Yeah.
But I think CSA just, any other discussion? So number 8, for Supervisor Simmons' request, number 8 was car allowances. Authorize the use of a car allowance for members of a county board of supervisors in lieu of mileage reimbursement to simplify travel for district business.
No.
No.
Yeah, well, it's been withdrawn.
Yeah.
They knew there was a ton of opposition.
Oh, geez.
Even supervisors weren't supporting it, so.
Like I said, I just mainly wanted read so the public knew.
Yeah, I know, it's
What
fine,
was withdrawn.
absolutely. Number 10, court system financial responsibility. Place the financial responsibility for the court system on the state of Arizona, who directly mandates the courts.
It's probably not going to be seen, but I think we need to push it. I think we need to let them know.
I'm going to vote no. And the reason I'm going to vote no is because I totally support the idea, but imagine the legislature agreeing to take on another financial burden in light of what they're going to be dealing with already in an uncertain budget year.
And if you give them that responsibility, we'll never get it back again. If somebody
Well,
ever changes their
we don't want to pay
mind.
for it because we have no control.
Yeah,
We pay for the bulk of it,
yes, we do.
and we have no say-so on how it's spent. It's a recurring theme with counties, right? We have to pay for things
That
like
aren't ours.
ADJC, Alltex, that we have no control over. Access,
Mhm.
massive amounts of our budget. You know what I mean? We're talking tens of millions of dollars, I believe, when you add it all up. So anyway, I recommend we vote no, not because it's not a good idea, but because to me, it's going to be an absolute waste of political capital. The state is not going to take on an additional responsibility,
You're right.
and CSA is going to have too much on their plate. So any
Well,
other
they're not going to
discussion?
take on the financial responsibility.
No, they're not going to take it on. Why would we ask CSA to, take that burden on when it's going to be DOA, and they've got so much other good legislation. Well, it's not that it's not good. They've got so much other important legislation that they're going to have to work on. So.
Yeah.
Well, we could submit it and, it's not even going to get to a committee, but we could submit it as being a.
But they have to spend political capital. It's their job. If the supervisors ask them to run this, they're going to run it. And they have to work on it.
They'll run it, but, okay, never mind.
Well, they have to work on it, right?
You have to know that the committee chair gets to choose all that, you drop it in the bucket and the committee chair gets to decide whether it's going to get to the committee or not. And so you spend an hour or 30 minutes with the members of the committee and it's never even going to get to committee. It's not like they're going to spend any capital on it because it's not going to get anywhere to start with. So.
Okay, then why would we vote for it?
Well, because sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 years to get legislation passed. At least with this one, we could start it so that it's in the hopper, and then and maybe in another year, maybe 2, they would start looking at it if we have a good year. I don't know. I'm just saying that
Well,
that I hate to vote down something that one of the counties is. I don't like to vote down something that is important to one of the counties if we can,
it's
get it
important to all
started.
counties. I mean, this is a large financial burden to
important.
us.
It is.
But I can't see putting something else on their plate that
Well,
is not going to go anywhere.
and how do we know it's not going to go anywhere?
Well, you just told me it's not.
I know it's not going to go anywhere, but
That's what you just
sometimes
told me.
everybody, but
That's
sometimes
how I
people,
know.
but sometimes they surprise you. You'd be surprised sometimes. So depending on who the chair of the committee is, depending on, committee makeup, depending on where they're from, that's all kinds of stuff.
I'll be voting no.
Well,
So, any comments, Supervisor Simmons?
I'm not sure what, I'm thinking no, but I'm not sure. It's one of those ones.
I'm just thinking of CSA staff. They've got an overwhelming
responsibility.
already. I can't see putting anything else on their plate, especially something that we know is not going to go forward. So that's my opinion. Any other comments on number 10? Okay. Number 11 was withdrawn, and it was agricultural composting. Clarify the agricultural composting exemption in ARS, or Arizona Revised Statutes, to close a loophole being used to avoid local zoning and other requirements by digester facilities producing methane and other fuels.
Mm.
That was put in by Pinal County, and the supervisor, I think, who was backing that, says he just wants to work with industry for another year and see where they're going. So that's why
That
they would.
one, I would almost like to see if we could get in with them and maybe include something reference to the problem we have with
With our
sewage coming in from California. To see if maybe something could be kind of work together.
Yeah.
It
Get
just
control of that.
can't. I don't disagree with you.
Do you want to address
about
that?
Interstate Commerce Clause. Paul?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Paul Melcher, Director of Economic Development and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Chairman, as we had looked at a possible CSA proposal to, as part of this legislative session, one of the things that came up was, you're right, it's when overall.
You can take your mask off, Paul.
Well,
You're far enough away, but that's okay. Don't take it off.
There you go. Oh, no, put it back on.
thank you.
Oh, dang.
Switching with Supervisor Reyes today. But anyway,
He taught me
Mr. Chair,
well.
so what we're working toward is a resolution within the community itself. We're creating a stakeholder group to address biosolids in Yuma County. We understand that the different application of biosolids and their impact county to county is so unique that it's hard to get a coalition of the counties because of that diversity. So we're trying to get a local solution here to bring in, the stakeholders would include ag tech and the other biosolid applicants who are looking and using those ADQ permits. So right now, I think from a Yuma County perspective, I would say we could try to resolve our own biosolid issues. From that, get ADQ online, look how we can better streamline some permitting. And then ultimately, if it results in some legislation that needs to be passed in order to solidify the permit requirements within that, I think that's a good way to go to address our issues. Tying the two together, I think there's a little disparity because when you look at the biosolids, it's not for the generation of anything except incorporation onto the ag lands. When you look at this proposal, it really goes back to the composting issue. And it might go back to even some of the permitting requirements about the composting that we have and the challenges out at the one that's at 40th Street. But overall, I think that we would probably be better served separating our biosolid issue from this, working on it locally, and then taking a look at this again if it comes up, if there's a question about it goes back to ag exemption. There are a lot of other issues that would be separate from this and the biosolids.
Mr. Chairman, Paul,
Yes.
that, with you guys talking now, does that put that 6,000 acres on hold while you guys are in conversation, or is that going ahead?
No, Mr. Chairman, and Supervisor Simmons, that's still a lawful application within the current ADQ permitting guidelines. So it'll continue to move forward. Our goal will be to see if we can ensure that ADQ is always enforcing the standards and making sure that we have enough standards built within that permitting application to ensure that there's sufficient reporting that goes along to ensure permit requirements are being met by the applicants.
And the good news is that 6,000 acres is not additional acreage. It's acreage that was transferred from one user to another. So the ag tech was taking on those 6,000 acres from another.
Oh.
It had been applied on the same land.
That's good
Okay,
to know.
so it's
Thank
already
you.
been done.
That's good to know.
Yeah, excellent, thank you.
That
You know,
helps.
I didn't think well, Mr. Melcher. Were you prepared to present these, or did I step on your toes?
Mr. Chairman, you certainly didn't. I figured you would use your discretion. I provided the notes for your reference.
Thank
If you
you.
wanted any
You want to go ahead and
feedback,
continue the rest of it?
if that's your,
Sure, why
Sure.
don't you go ahead?
okay, Mr. Chair, thank you. Number 13 was the elected
We're on
improvement.
12.
Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't come to any consensus yet, right?
No.
Oh, I
We
skipped
were
one,
on
didn't
number
I?
11.
See, you got me wrong.
Okay, I'm going to take it over. You're just screwing the whole thing up.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, absolutely, 11 withdrawn. Number 12, the junk vehicle removal, allow counties to address junk vehicles during abatement of dilapidated structures. I think that in Yuma County, we deal with this already. We've addressed it through our zoning ordinance. So I think that as you look at this, since it's permissive language, it goes back to the most common, or the comment that was related to this was, again, if CSA can take this on at a future date or something, looking at the workload of staff. But to me, I think that's something that could be worked on just to reinforce the concept of addressing it currently through zoning ordinances. But if they want to go through this process, I didn't think there was any real issue about establishing that, particularly since it's permissive.
Yeah, again, that was, and you can see the consensus reach. Consider this next year.
Yeah.
Paul, did we adequately address the issue through our zoning ordinance where that we can move these vehicles when we're taking down a dilapidated structure?
Mr. Chairman, the best answer I can give you is at the time when we did the last abatements, the answer was yes. I don't know if anything has changed during that time since I haven't been the planning and zoning director. I'd have to go back and ask specifically or ask even legal if they're aware of any changes that have impacted that, but that would be an answer I'd have to come back and get you.
Okay, and well, the reason I asked that, Paul, is perhaps you could check with legal and see if we were taking down a dilapidated structure and there were vehicles on the property that were impeding that, do we have the ability to remove them? And if so, then I would suggest you put something together and share that with CSA so they could push that out to the other counties and let them know that you can take care of it through your own zoning ordinance. If so, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Wasn't this the one that the gentleman who is proposing it said is this the one where he couldn't, he wasn't willing to withdraw it because so many of his folks had asked him
No,
to
that's
do it?
coming up.
Oh, okay. Thank
All
you.
right. Mr. Chairman, then, moving on to number 13, elected improvement district boards. Authorize the county board of supervisors to create and empower an elected board of directors for county recreation improvement districts. The pros on this were that
that's this
other
one.
special districts already have the ability, just the recreation improvement districts weren't so designated. So it's permissive language, again, that the counties can do this. It's not a requirement that the county shall create such elected boards. And there was no opposition to this item expressed during the meeting.
That's the one where I asked him if he'd put it off until next year, but
And he said no.
no, which was fine. I mean, I respected his answer and I have no problem supporting it.
I think
Supervisor Simmons?
I think it was even I will carry the water on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
they said they would carry the vast majority of the load, so I'm good with that.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, we're at number 14 then, irrigation non-expansion areas. Authorize the Arizona Department of Water Resources Director to declare a subsequent irrigation non-expansion area prospectively. So Mr. Chair and members of the board, the pros on this were supports bills that were introduced. You heard from Senator Otondo yesterday and some of the other advocates today that this is really supporting another reoccurring bills introduced last session. There's some strict requirements for hydrology reports to be submitted with the request, so it's not just a forecast of some kind of irrigation use. You have to actually prove and substantiate that the hydrology supports it. I wanted to talk a little bit more on the grandfather's existing irrigation clause. I contacted Mr. Cunningham. If you saw him, he was the gentleman who was presenting from Cunningham
Yeah.
Legal. And so what the grandfather clause in there results in is as long as you've been irrigating that land 5 years prior to the announcement of the INA being established, then you're allowed to, for continued irrigation rights. But it has to be within that 5-year period. Otherwise, it would start over as a new application and you'd have to go through all the requirements that would be under the new establishment for an INA. The other benefit is it will ensure that there's a 100-year adequacy for this irrigation.
right.
And I thought it was interesting that the 100 years ties also into the assured water supplies that have to be demonstrated for municipal use as well. So I think that's a really good tie in there. And then the public hearing and comments, what we're really doing is accommodating a local creation of an INA and local review. And if you have an appeal to that, it goes directly to the Superior Court within that county, where the INA would be established. So there is a good appeal process. It would be very quickly done so that any local control would be preserved. Let me see. And yes, because the other cons were when you look at it and maintaining local control and setting up those INA guidelines, that would limit the ability of having the director of the ADWR be swayed in any way in case there was some political pressure applied. In this current instance, so I think that was a good way of addressing some of those issues that not only fall into this item, but continue for the next item in terms of the AWDR oversight and having one person who's a political appointee having control of the system.
So what do you guys think?
Well, that's the way it is set up right now, is that that person has control of it.
That was, yes.
ADWR director has control of that, so I'm in favor of it. I know that,
I am too.
I know that there are a lot of rural counties, not ours, but a lot of rural counties that are having issues with overextension of wells and irrigation on aquifers that aren't getting replenished to the tune that they should be. So,
No, I agree.
I think too that one, it needs to be up to the counties, and this is the first. It's going to get worse as the years go by,
Yes, it is.
and if we don't start putting a stop on it now with the state and getting it under the county's control to determine their own fate as to where their water goes and how it's used, everything's going to end up going to the middle of the state. They're going to take everything that they can to
great
fuel that growth.
state, America.
So 14 and 15, I would say yes, just because we need to put it in the county's hands as far as what goes on with their water
Yes.
supply.
Okay, let's go to 15.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. 15 is groundwater basins. Authorize a county board of supervisors outside of an active management area to designate groundwater basins or subbasins as rural management area if they meet established criteria. So as we had a little bit of that carryover discussion, again, some of the benefits of this proposal are it provides local control for water planning. I wanted to talk briefly about the safe yield and the depleted basin. So as you look at the two different types there, it would just be two different management strategies for that basin. What I was able to read and get a quick research on was that the safe yield actually tries to compute so that as the water is being used, you're trying to prevent a detrimental end, whereas the depleted basin, you understand that there's not really a return. That basin just keeps getting used and used and used without the assurity that there will be any return of that water. So I think that's the two different styles there, and I think it goes back to Supervisor Simmons' statement about local control. It's particularly what's the impact on that basin, what's the best management style to incorporate for that rural management area. The rural management area members are recommended by the board but approved by the governor. So I still think that there's some local control in having that designation. In terms of the active management area and the rural management area, the other advantages on the rural management area that you get to look at the rule making based on what the current conditions are. The AMA freezes the ag pumping and all, and so it's really just a stop on that ag use versus the RMA, which you could take a look at the existing conditions. Maybe it doesn't need to be stopped, but moderated or rolled back at a certain level, could be adjusted. And I think that's part of that inherent flexibility of having the RMA. The other couple of benefits here, when you have the outreach to the tribe, I think that was a key element, that there wasn't any objection to the rule. I think the question was answered very well about the outreach of the tribe, how some of the tribal water elements are being considered with this, and understanding that this doesn't reach onto tribal property. Even though it doesn't have the reach onto the property, they need to also make sure they're cognizant of the tribal water use, so there's not a detrimental impact on creating a management area, rural management area, and then looking at a tribal impact that they didn't foresee. So I think that'll be key moving forward, is just making sure that if there's an RMA introduced somewhere, that they reach out to all the stakeholders to ensure that there isn't an unforeseen detrimental use that they hadn't calculated just by carving out that area, looking at it, and creating that rural management area. And then it's a first of its kind tool for water management, but it really sounds like it has, in terms of proposals 14 and 15, has a real, as I said a couple times, sounds like a little bit of a broken record, but it really does provide for that local control and consideration for water use and water in those specific areas. So, Mr. Chairman, that would be the end of all the items that we have for the board's review.
It would have been, except for I rushed in and I didn't think. Administrator Thorpe didn't interrupt me and correct me. You want to run through the first few that I just kind of rushed through and give us some background for the public's benefit?
Do you want to comment on 15? while you're in that area? You didn't?
Oh, I think
you
there's no
haven't-
doubt we're fully in support of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're fully in
Most
support of that
definitely.
one.
Because I'm sure, judging from the last few that you did and how well prepared you were, it might be beneficial to the public. Just get a little bit of your explanation on the first items that.
Sure, Mr. Chairman,
I
I'd be
went
happy
through.
to. Mr. Chair, did you want me to start with the overall CSA?
No,
level
just
for-
go ahead and start with number
just
one. I
the-
think the priorities are
okay.
pretty self-explanatory.
So, Mr. Chair, on the first one, on the short-term vacation rental, looking at number 1 and 2, where you're looking at the short-term vacation rental, the determination of the property tax and its use in the terms of its classification, and then the regulation through zoning codes, I think that they work to support each other. So once it's understood and you can specifically identify the difference between those short-term rentals, an infrequently occupied short-term rental, and then one that was built for commercial use. As you'll recall from last year's CSA Summit, there were even some houses that were built with bedrooms facing outside. So, if there were 6 or 8 bedrooms that were already built onto a house with outside-facing bedrooms and a parking spot for each one, it was pretty clear that that was intended for commercial use and not for typical residential occupancy.
Right.
So I think those 2 items help shore that up, because you're getting local control over making sure that those properties are properly classified, but then also if you have those necessary zoning regulations, a county may choose to do that, again, permissible, but there would be local regulation, and those would be specific to the issues that are being addressed. Mr. Chair, moving on to number 3, rural counties transient lodging tax. Enable counties with a population of fewer than 500,000 persons to levy a tax on transit lodging in unincorporated areas of the county for economic development and tourism. Mr. Chair, I think the most important element, again, is something that you and the board had mentioned, was it's the equity with the cities to be able to levy that tax, and then in turn use that for economic development and tourism promotion. I think there was an argument in there that was included that some of the cities feel like it would deter people from staying in the city. However, I'm not sure how many people ever look at a hotel, is it placed in the county or the city, because I want to try to avoid a transient lodging tax. So from that standpoint, I really think it does address that equity position, and if it provides some funding for the counties to be able to use also to attract tourism and economic development, then I think that's something that we could certainly support. Mr. Chair, number 4 was the resources for the juvenile dependency representation. Again, I would just echo your existing comments. It was one of those things that if you look at the trends, there is a downward trend, but the real question would come once you try to make a decision is, if it's still affecting 5 or 6 counties, take that into consideration. As the board had mentioned, sometimes you might promote or support something going back to the Maricopa and Pima County payment of the ADJC of the $8.5 million. That's certainly supportable, because we want to eliminate that and have it understood that it wasn't a really solid legislative act to start with. On this one, I think if you wanted to look at it again, if the downward trend keeps going that way, it's a lot more difficult to argue on behalf of looking at providing that support when we have other priorities that might, that $2.5, $3 million might go toward. So
Yeah, I would encourage my
Yes, sir.
seatmates to vote no on that. That's a heavy lift, and I don't think CSA staff needs that burden this year.
I think they're going to have their hands full. I agree.
Yeah, I just would encourage you to, I understand, but I don't think it's significant enough. We held our own and managed through it. But
A no for me.
that's my comment.
So, Mr. Chair, then moving to number 5 with the dangerous and incompetent and not restorable. I don't have anything to add other than what the board has already stated. I think it's great to have that mechanism in place just to make sure that we're providing protections for society. So,
Thank you.
and there was no opposition expressed to this from the supervisors. The write-in candidates requirement, the write-in candidates maintain residency in the county, district, or precinct that are proposing to represent for at least 120 days prior to filing. Mr. Chairman, I think it's important here to notice that it didn't change any of the write-in filing requirements per se. All it is talking about residency. So I don't think it was ever meant that you had to file it right. It's not a requirement to file your write-in candidacy papers at the same time It still would allow write-in candidates under the same guise. You just have to demonstrate that you've been a resident in the county for 120 days. And I
Yeah.
think that provides a lot of equity between, even though there's a slight difference still in terms of how those candidacies can be filed, it doesn't create any kind of disparity in terms of the residency.
And my fellow supervisors, my comment is the same. There's nothing wrong with it, but it makes no difference if it passes this year or the following year, as there's no election between. I would encourage you to vote no and take that load off of CSA's back for this year.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that could be something, even that ACO, there always tends to be I don't want to say a roster of elections-based
I'm sure it will
legislation
be
that
on
comes
ACO.
up. So I'm sure that somebody would get that on there, and it's likely it would fall onto an ACO list of election items anyway.
Yeah, CSA staff can simply say, yeah, we generally support it, and then that's all they have to do. I just don't want them to have to do the lifting.
So, Mr. Chairman, on number 7 was the PRS excise tax and the allowance for the counties to levy up to the 0.5% sales tax. The only thing I would add there too is that it provides actually 2 options. The first one would be that direct pay down as you're moving forward, or you could leverage it as the revenue source for the bonds. But either way, it would result in savings for the counties to pay off that debt in a much more rapid way than it would be to just try to address it, within their own budgetary confines. And I think the other thing too is sometimes when you look at bonding capacity and other issues, the availability to levy the tax would be maybe preferable in not looking at the bonding capacities and those impacts. So and I think that's pretty much what was resolved in terms of the consensus. Was it was a good idea, no opposition expressed, but just take a look at those majority, supermajority and unanimous type votes that are required to trigger each of those elements.
Mr. Chair, I have a question about taking it to the public for a vote. If it's a supermajority or it's unanimous for this, would there be a need to take it to the voters?
Absolutely. If you had, say, La Paz County with 3 members and
Yeah,
one
all
was
3.
opposed,
They would
they
have
could
to.
completely block the ability of the county to.
But you're requesting that they have a unanimous and take it to the
No.
voters.
No. My request was if you're a 3-member board and the board's making the decision without taking it to the voters, it has to be unanimous. If you're a 5-member board, it has to have a supermajority. And you'll
Or
see
you have to
after the
take it.
comma, it says with a simple majority to send the tax initiative to the
got
public
it.
for a vote.
Thank you.
Okay?
Then it does exactly
great.
what I want. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I like to, what you brought up as a question, since we're looking at doing a bond to pay ours off, if this comes back or money comes back to the county, can we use that to pay down the bond?
Yeah,
And
that the
the one-
answer was affirmative, or perhaps EORP as well.
Yeah.
Well, no, that doesn't work because it's pooled.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at any rate, yes, that we could put it toward the bond. So yes, so we're okay either way. I was concerned. I was perhaps going to advocate that we don't go 100%, but that alleviated my concerns. So
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
glad
as
it
you had
came
talked
up.
about the question yesterday about 90%, if somebody tried to make counties whole or something, I thought that was a great answer by Brandon.
Yes.
Was, that's how.
that's exactly what I was thinking about coming back to the board when we
But
talked about
with
it.
our
but-
bond, you can't pay it off for the first 10 years.
No, but you could use that budget authority to pay for it,
Oh,
to
got
make the
it.
payment.
Okay. Oh, I got it. Okay.
Mr. Chair, number 8 was the car allowance that was withdrawn.
Yeah.
Didn't have any comment on that. Number 9 was the military leave pay. The only thing I had in addition to what the board had already discussed was that cap in terms of creating the equity on pay and eliminating the differentiation between shifts. So I think that just comes down again to the board. If you have a preference on if you want CSA to propose it this year or next, that would be your determining factor. But otherwise, it was a very supportable proposal.
Yeah, again, I would support my seatmates to just vote no tomorrow, simply because it's the same old story. CSA's got a lot on their plate. It's not a bad idea, but let's do it next year because it's been this way for decades.
Do you think there is the support to wait till next year? Or do you
Well, we'll
think
find
it'll
out tomorrow. I mean, I'm just encouraging this board to vote no, because I don't want that on CSA's plate this year. They've got so much. And it's been this way for decades, one more year. It isn't gonna kill anything, and then run it next year. So I encourage a no vote for my friends on the board.
Really?
All right, Mr. Chairman, number 10 was the last one on the list for review. Then the court system financial responsibility was place the financial responsibility for the court system on the state of Arizona, who directly mandates the courts. And Mr. Chair, your comments at the board already echoed what I had put down in terms of notes. I think the real challenge here would be to see if there's any appetite for this transition, even though it makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of complex issues. And I would just say that when you look at some of the offsets, the counties are looking at having, preventing cost shifts and other things. So that would come back to what's the likelihood of anybody entertaining this, and then how much effort would need to go into it. But, it's one of those things that even Pinal County just recommended. Maybe there's a good time to research and review what that would really look like before it got down, too far into it. But,
Right.
Mr. Chairman, it'd be a very interesting topic to come up and see how that
Right.
see how it was received.
Again, I just would request my friends make a no vote on that
Well, it's
for the
gonna
same
take,
reason.
it's gonna take a lot of capital to get
Yeah.
this through.
And
A
this is
lot
not the right year.
of
This is
capital.
too much.
So,
When you consider what they have to run from last year and now again this year, that's the heaviest load I've seen them carry. So not that the legislation or the proposal is bad, it's just,
Is it winnable?
we want the other stuff. We want the other stuff that,
Well,
from
it's-
last year and the stuff we've approved,
well, with
that we
the,
will approve this year, so.
yeah, I agree.
There's
With all the
several other
stuff-
higher priority things.
I apologize the time that I wasted due to my oversight. Paul, you did a great job. You were very well prepared. I should have
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
recognized that you were here to take the reins. So I appreciate you being willing to go back and run through it. I think it benefited the public, so.
You're very
I
welcome.
do.
Mr. Chair, before, if there are any other questions before I move away from the podium or anything else?
Anything else? No? Thank you. Well done, Paul. Okay, anything else from the board?
No, I think I'm good.
Susan?
Did you want to, the three of you want to vote on these items, or you just wanted to discuss it and kind of get consensus?
Oh,
I
we
think
don't
we
wanna-
just want to gain consensus, because actually, we're going to have different, we may vote differently on a particular item. And so, I don't think we never do it as a board, but we do discuss them and figure out where each other sits on a particular item.
Yeah, we
Um,
always get together and do that.
Were our
yeah.
proxies accepted? Good. Yeah, good. I was afraid it was late, but good.
They were late, but they accepted them.
Okay.
They
Yeah,
understood.
I had a feeling they would be late.
The
Okay,
one
anything
is-
else?
One was an extenuating circumstance.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Mhm.